India has just made a massive change to its legal system, completely throwing out a criminal law that dates all the way back to its colonial past. Today, we're going to break down what's replaced it. The Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, or BNS, a brand new legal code for a modern India. Now, to really get why this is such a big deal, you have to realize that the old law, the Indian Penal Code, was from 1860. Yeah, let that sink in for a second. That's more than 160 years ago. It was a rulebook built by the British for a colonial India. So you could say a major overhaul was just a little overdue. And this is its replacement, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita 2023. This is not just some minor update, it's a complete rewrite. It was designed from the ground up to be India's new modern rulebook for crime and punishment. You know, that jump from 1860 to 2023 is so much more than just a change on the calendar. It really represents this fundamental symbolic shift away from a colonial legal system toward a new, truly independent Indian one. So with that history lesson out of the way, let's dive into what the BNS actually is and what it's supposed to do. At its heart, the BNS does the same basic job as the old code. It gathers together all the criminal offenses. So, to put it simply, it's the official rulebook that tells you what counts as a crime in India and what the consequences could be. All right, now let's get into the really interesting stuff. We're going to look at some of the most important changes, starting with the punishments themselves and how the BNS redefines some really basic ideas. So, the new code sets out 6 main types of punishment. Most of these are probably familiar to you: the death penalty, prison, fines, that sort of thing. But look at number 6. Community service. That one is brand new, and it points to a pretty big shift in thinking. For the first time ever, community service is an official punishment in India's main criminal code. And that's a huge deal. Why? Because it moves beyond just punishing people for certain offenses. It brings in this idea of reform, where an offender can actually repay their debt to society through work. This could even help reduce prison overcrowding for more minor crime. The BNS also drags the law right into the 21st century. For instance, the definition of a document isn't just paper anymore. It now officially includes things like emails and digital records. The term gender has been updated to be inclusive of transgender people. And for the first time, cybercrimes are spelled out explicitly. These aren't just little tweaks. They're essential upgrades for the world we live in today. But you know, it's not all about change. The BNS also makes sure to keep some of the bedrock principles of justice that are just crucial for any fair legal system. And this leads us to a really important question. If you do something that causes harm, does that automatically make you a criminal? Well, the law says no, not necessarily. The BNS, just like the old code, has this critical section on what it calls general exceptions. These are basically situations where something that looks like a crime isn't. For example, an act done by a very young child or something that was a complete and total accident. The law also makes exceptions for things like self-defense or if the person wasn't of sound mind. The key thing to remember here is that context and intent, they mean everything. Here's a perfect example of this, taken right from the law itself, to explain that good faith exception. It says, imagine a surgeon performing a risky but totally necessary operation on his own child. Now, the act of surgery is, by its nature, harmful, but because the surgeon's goal was to cure the child and he was acting in good faith, it's not a crime. It shows how the law makes room for real-world situations. So, after looking at all this, the new punishments, the updated language, the old principles, let's zoom out. Why does this new law actually matter so much, beyond just the words on a page? The real takeaway, the big picture, is that the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita is a very deliberate effort to decolonize India's justice system. It's about finally shedding a legal framework that was put in place by a foreign power and creating a new one that's more modern, more inclusive, and just fundamentally more Indian. And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? A new, reformed rulebook has been written. But the real test is how it's used. Will this new code actually deliver a faster, fairer form of justice for modern India? Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see.